human, we are animals, we crave the ability to be we. I know it's called me undies. We undies might have sounded differently, right?
Is it a disco now?
Yeah, it's the after party, so it's now we go with the flash.
My goal in life is to be a laptop sticker.
Me too.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
It's a great honor, Mr. Jaffe. It's always nice to be with you.
I'm so happy to be with you. I'm honored.
Thanks for doing this, too. It's a real service to the community.
Thank you for doing this, Joseph, for doing CoronaTV in general. And it's your gift to the universe, and it's appreciated.
Very human, and I like that.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're insane!
Welcome to CoronaTV, not COVID TV. Sometimes people go, hey, I love what you're doing with COVID TV. It's not COVID TV, it's CoronaTV. This is aligned with a beer, for God's sake. There is no global pandemic here in lockdown where I just drink beer all day long. It is good to see you, my friends. I am wearing my Missouri Bell Casino t-shirt, a little homage to the Ozarks, or to Ozark, the Netflix show, one of the few shows I've actually watched during lockdown or shelter in place. And I'm just thrilled because because Cindy Gallop is here, and she's just incredible. It's so good to see her chatting backstage, if you will. She's the founder of If We Ran the World and Make Love Not Porn, and hopefully she'll tell you a little bit about both and whatever's on her mind. It's just going to be fantastic to reconnect with her and have a conversation. And of course, you guys are all invited to it. Hello to you, Joey, and to Bob. I'm going to try not to break anything today. I'm just going to try and stay out of trouble. That's my goal. That is victory today. So as you know, yesterday had an amazing conversation with John Durham, the other John Durham. I think I need to change the photo back to Professor John Durham. Cindy today, John Lawson tomorrow, where I can finally tell him why I owe him so much and why I'm so grateful to him. And finally, Martin Lindstrom on Friday. Thank you again to all of you for commenting, liking, sharing, subscribing, watching, telling people about it. I'm starting now to collect some of the data and the analytics and the stats from the various different channels. And it's very encouraging, I have to say. So thank you. I really, really appreciate it and appreciate you. So to my Facebook friends, happy birthday to all of you. A little shout out to Kathy Belzer. Just, a random shout out there. And of course, to all my contacts on LinkedIn. Appreciate you guys very much. Keep up the contacts with me. It's awesome. Just a couple of things in the news I wanted to chat about before getting into the soliloquy. It's kind of weird when we look at the news oftentimes, and we look at the stuff and we go, well, if that's true, according to CNN, blah blah blah. But if that's true, then this is a different. If that's true, it's not about a salacious, new tell-all book. Is it even possible that we went from 2 to 3 million cases in just 28 days? Now that is insane, and it just shows you that every time our perception, our expectations in terms of managing expectations, what we believed was impossible is now possible. What we believed was implausible is plausible. I mean, this to me really just blew me away. Something that didn't blow me away is yet another bankruptcy. Lord and Taylor last week, Brooks Brothers. I'm going to write about it or do something about it, but I don't think it's inconceivable that we may actually see every single clothing manufacturer or retail concern go out of business. Every single one, based on the fact that their footprint, their blueprint, their business model, their bricks and mortar presence, it just cannot sustain a viable operation at the moment. And of course, the department stores, the Searses, the JCPenney's of the world. I mean, it's it's just carnage out there. It's insane. And you know, I often say this gives me no joy, you know, to have written this book. It gives me no joy to be able to, you know, take you know, to gloat. I'm not doing that. In fact, I wrote a book a year ago saying, watch out, be warned, you know, the end is nigh. Take action, take heed. And unfortunately, you know, it's just not getting better. So anyway, you know, enough about that negativity. What I wanted to talk about today is something that I think about when I think about my guest, about Cindy. I think about justice, and I called her, I think today, the Uncaped Crusader, because she is a crusader, but she doesn't wear a cape, but she is a superhero. And I wanted to talk in this particular case about one of the most important virtues, which is justice. You know, one of the most recognized legal symbols visible in the architecture of the Supreme Court building is the female figure representing justice, who is depicted in 3 sculptural groups. Portraying justice as a female figure dates back to depictions of Themis and Justitia in ancient mythology. Themis was known for her clear-sightedness, and she was the Greek goddess of justice and law. In Roman mythology, Justitia was one of the 4 virtues, along with prudence, fortitude, and temperance. Over time, justice became associated with scales to represent impartiality and a sword to symbolize power. Now, during the 16th century, justice was often portrayed with a blindfold. The origin of the blindfold is unclear, but it seems to have been added to indicate the tolerance of or ignorance to abuse of the law by the judicial system. Today, the blindfold is generally accepted as a symbol of impartiality, and of course, we know the saying, justice is blind. Now, all of that was courtesy of supremecourt.gov, which also ruled today in favor of Little Sisters of the Poor in an Obamacare contraception case. The court ruled 7-2 in favor of the Trump administration and the Catholic charity. So in a ruling of church and state, I wonder which side was wearing the blindfold. Actually, I wonder why we even need blindfolds anymore. We need masks, but why do we need blindfolds? Why should justice be blind? Justice should be all-seeing, all-knowing. Justice should be universal. Justice should be democratized. Why are we hiding our eyes? What are we hiding our eyes from? Isn't it time to be super subjective when it comes to justice? Justice for all, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness should never be tempered, restricted, controlled, or gated. At a time when statues are being removed or torn down, shouldn't we include Lady Justice in that portfolio? Or at a very minimum, give her a slight makeover by removing her blindfold? At a time when the word universal applies more to a pandemic than to healthcare, isn't it time to make that universally applicable to justice as well? And now it's time to bring on my guest. But in order to do that, I wanted to show you a little bit of a video clip to whet your appetite.
I date younger men, predominantly men in their 20s. And when I date younger men, I have sex with younger men. And when I have sex with younger men, I encounter very directly and personally the real ramifications of the creeping ubiquity of hardcore pornography in our culture. So in an era where hardcore porn is more freely and widely available on the internet than ever before, and where kids are therefore able to access it at a younger and younger age than ever before, there is an entire generation growing up that believes that what you see in hardcore pornography is the way that you have sex. And this is particularly exacerbated because we live in a puritanical double standards culture where people believe that a teen abstinence campaign will actually work, where parents are too embarrassed to have conversations about sex with their children, and where educational institutions are terrified of being politically incorrect if they pick up those conversations. And so it's not surprising that hardcore pornography de facto has become sex education. Now, as a mature, experienced, confident older woman, when I encounter this, I have no problem realizing that a certain amount of re-education, rehabilitation, and reorientation has to take place.
Lucinda Cindy Lee Gallop is an English advertising consultant, founder, and former chair of the US branch of advertising firm Bartle Bogle Hegarty, BBH, because I probably butchered that, and founder of the We Ran the World and Make Love Not Porn companies. According to the TED blog, Gallup's TED Talk, Make Love Not Porn, was one of the most talked about presentations at the 2009 TED conference. And in fact, when I checked this morning, it's been viewed on multiple different places, over 2.5 to 3 million times. She lives in New York City. She is in New York City right now, and I'm in her apartment right now, which is not creepy at all. Cindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joseph. Thrilled to be here. And you are in my old apartment. I'm delighted to see that you have the backdrop of the black apartment behind you. And I am in my current apartment, which is the Sky apartment in Midtown Manhattan.
So that's why I can't find you. I've been looking for you everywhere. So I have a beautiful collage or montage of that apartment. It's just absolutely magnificent. And I saw that the Notorious B.I.G. filmed a music video there.
Well, not the Notorious B.I.G. because he was sadly no longer with us at that point, but P. Diddy, Nelly, Usher and Pharrell filmed the video for Nasty Gal off the Biggie Duets album in the black apartment, yes.
So tell me about why was it called the black apartment? Why black? You designed it, right?
Yeah. No, I didn't design it personally. So where the black apartment came from was I have a very specific New York real estate philosophy, which, by the way, is also what I pursued with my current apartment. So my philosophy is always go looking for what nobody else wants. Because the only way to have a nice apartment in New York is to buy a shithole and do it up. And so in the case of the black apartment, back in 2003, I decided it was time to stop pouring rent down a black hole and, actually find somewhere to buy an own. I couldn't afford a single thing, especially in Chelsea, which is where I was renting at the time. I was very keen to stay in Chelsea. The only thing I could afford was a very large amount of completely raw space at the old YMCA on West 23rd Street across from the Chelsea Hotel. Because the Y had moved out, they'd sold the building to a developer who demolished everything and was selling it off as raw space. And so I bought 3,800 square feet of raw space that I then needed to turn into an apartment. And by the way, the fun thing about it was that I bought the front half of the 6th floor of the YMCA, which is where they used to have their indoor pool in the back half. And so my apartment literally was the men's shower and locker rooms at the YMCA. I basically lived where Village People wrote the song about, gay Chelsea cultural epicenter. So I had to build an apartment from scratch. And I was very lucky because also buying into the Y were a young couple, Stefan Bublil and Gina Alvarez, who ran a design and architectural agency called actually The Apartment. And they were building a home in their own space. And so I commissioned them to design and project manage and build my apartment. And when I was briefing them, I realized that, the great thing about raw space and building your own apartment is that you can make everything work exactly the way you want it to. And I remember that a few years earlier, I'd been sitting, I was in one of my favorite cities in the world, Shanghai. I was sitting in what was one of my favorite bars in the world, sadly no longer open there, but it was called the Glamour Bar, drinking my favorite cocktail in the world, a martini. And the Glamour Bar was beautifully lit and beautifully designed. So I remember sitting there on my second martini, 3 sheets to the wind, looking around me in a drunken haze, going, I wish I lived somewhere like this. And so I thought, now's my chance. And so I said to Stefan, here's the overall brief for my apartment. when night falls, I want to feel like I'm in a bar in Shanghai. And he went, we can do that. And so he and his team went off and they researched bars and lounges in Shanghai. And they came back to me and they said, okay, here's our vision. Floor, ceiling, walls, all black. And I went, ah! And he said, no. He said, the space is large enough to take it and light enough, lots of windows. We will paint it gloss black, so the light reflects off the black, so it's not oppressive. And it'll make all your art and belongings really pop. And it totally did, because people would visit me in the black apartment who had no idea I lived in an all black apartment until I told them, because it made everything look so colorful. So that's how I came to live in the black apartment.
It's a beautiful story. Roxanne said she loves that the story. I'm sure you and the approach. And I mean, if there is a tie in or a tie back to your old life in the old world, which is your agency and advertising days, it's the power and importance of not a tight brief, but the right brief. And sometimes that brief is open-ended. And, you know, I've always felt when you're working with a professional, let them do what they do best and get out the way.
Absolutely. And in fact, the other overall brief for the black apartment, Joseph, was I said to them, you know, I want any guy who walks in through the front door to be a sure thing within 2 minutes. And they were.
and that's what's called ROI.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. So now you left the agency world, and that was when?
2005.
2005, and I mean, I really like. I can't state this enough and emphasize it enough. Which is, I mean, BBH was just on a hill in terms of inspirational work, fantastic people, real visionaries and leaders, and you were an inextricable part of that. But you left the world. Why did you leave the agency world all the way back when? Besides being a prophetess and recognizing where it is right now, which is completely in the swamp, in the shits. I don't know, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, the industry had nothing to do with it. So basically, I turned 45 back in 2005, and I had my very own personal midlife crisis, in the sense that I'd always thought of 45 as kind of a midlife point. You know, in the couple of years running up to it, I'd thought, on one's 45th birthday is the moment when, but by the way, that's in a happy assumption one lives to be 90, fingers crossed, you know, obviously. Yeah. But, you know, I'd always thought, on one's 45th birthday is the moment when you should pause, take stock, reflect and review, where have I been, where am I going? So on February 1, 2005, I ideally did that. And that was the point at which I went, oh my God, I've just worked 16 years for the same advertising agency. Now, you know, as you said, I mean, amazing agency. I cannot say too many wonderful things about BBH, just phenomenal to work for. I'd worked for them in London, in Singapore. You know, the reason I came here to New York was I moved here 22 years ago to start up and run BBH New York. But it had been 16 years. The time had flown by, and I went, wow, you know, I think it's time to do something different. And then the issue was, I hadn't the faintest idea what. Because I'd always said to people, advertising is a great industry to work in to find out what you want to do next. Because, you know, in advertising, you work with so many different brands, clients, you know, different industry sectors. So I guess I'd always thought that my next big thing would bubble up from the ether. And there I was at the age of 45, and it hadn't. So vast amounts of thought and angsting ensued. And eventually I went, if I want to review every possible option open to me for what is effectively the second half of my life, maybe the best thing to do is to put myself on the market very publicly and go, okay, guys, here I am. What do you got? So I made a huge leap into the unknown. In the summer of 2005, I resigned as chairman of BBH New York without a job to go to, and it was the best bloody thing I ever did in my life. And so that's how that happened.
Okay, and then what happened next?
Right. So the reason I say it was the best thing I did was because I am now evangelical about working for yourself. And by the way, Joseph, too many people make the mistake of thinking that a job is the safe option. It's not. Because in a job, you are at the complete mercy of management changes, industry downturns, marketplace dynamics. I always say, whose hands would you rather place your future in? Those of a large corporate entity who at the end of the day doesn't give a shit about you, or somebody who will always have your best interest at heart, i.e. you. And so, I began working for myself as a consultant, a speaker, and I've continued to do that ever since. And alongside that, became an entrepreneur and started up first If We Ran the World and then Make Love Not Porn.
All right, so we'll go to that too, If We Ran the World next. But I just want to go back to what you were saying, because it rings so true with me. I remember going to Shy Day and thinking, this is going to be my agency for life. I'm going to be a lifer. I'm going to get that retirement party and that proverbial gold Rolex watch. I wanted to align myself with an agency. Being from South Africa, working for Nando's Chicken Land, Reg Lascaris and John Hunt were the team there, and my wife was pregnant, and then during the .com bust and everything that ensued, 8% of the workforce was laid off, and several iterations later, I was laid off as well, and it was exactly. And I've never worked for another company willingly since. And it was amazing how I went there, and the overarching reason was security and stability. And it ended up being anything but. And it was that plus the fact that had I not been pushed gently or otherwise, I would not have become an entrepreneur and been able to just go for it. And so it's just interesting how parallel paths in many, you leapt without the safety net. I was pushed without a safety net, and both of us became entrepreneurs. And what I just found out in talking to you, we're both, it's a new word which I'm now going to use to describe myself, we're both solitaries.
Absolutely.
So for those of you that don't know, what is a solitary?
Right. So for your viewers, so Joseph and I were talking just before the show about the fact that, so I'm in my apartment, and actually I must just tell you about the Sky apartment, which is where I'm now living. So I sold the black apartment 5 years ago, and as I said, my real estate philosophy is always go looking for what nobody else wants. And so I raked Street Easy, operating that principle, and I came upon a listing that spoke to me for two reasons that would have had everybody else running 50 miles in the opposite direction. And by the way, they had, the apartment had been on the market for 8 months, no one had bought it. Reason number one, 0 photographs of the apartment on the listing. I went, great, it's a shithole. Okay, clearly so bad, they couldn't even find a teensy-weensy corner to cheat photographically. Borne out by point number 2, the copy said, bring your vision and your architect. I went, great, total shithole. So I called my broker, said, I want to go see this one. So he calls the other broker, makes an appointment, comes back, says, okay, Cindy, we're going to go on this day at this time. Then he said to me, oh, and by the way, just so you know, the other broker said to me, I hope your client has a lot of imagination. So he goes, she's got nothing but imagination, but I'm going, loving these vibes. This listing is talking my language already. So on the appointed day, we turn up at this building on 5th Avenue and 39th Street, which is very nondescript from the outside, very tall, no idea what you're going to find. Meet the broker in the lobby, and she says to us, before we go up, let me just prepare you. So I'm thinking, this is getting better and better. So she says, so this building was built 30 years ago. The developer who built it built on the roof, side by side, 2 penthouses. They're triplexes, penthouse A, penthouse B. We're going to go and see penthouse A. And penthouse A is lived in by a hoarder. And internally I went, ka-ching, jackpot. And she said, let me tell you, it was way worse when we first saw it. At least he's now cleared paths through the stuff. You can vaguely get into the rooms. And I'm just thinking, hallelujah. So the broker is obviously very startled. I'm completely unfazed at hearing this. As we go up in the elevator, she says to me, people with vision come here, they lose their vision instantly. And so some idea of how bad it was by the fact that she was deliberately underselling every step of the way to the front door. So I walk into this apartment and it is jam-packed full of stuff, piled high, can't see a thing. Plus, the apartment has not been touched in 30 years. There are holes in the walls. The windows are covered in shit. It's a wreck. But behind it, I saw 3 floors on the 33rd, 34th, 35th floors, outstanding views, 3 terraces, a huge amount of outdoor space. And I went, this is my apartment. And it took forever to negotiate, to get the guy out. But because everybody else ran screaming, it was a total bargain for Manhattan, but it then required a full-on gut renovation of everything. And that has been the last 2.5 years of complete nightmare. But we completed that at the end of last year in time for me to go into lockdown. And so, you know, I was saying to Joseph that I count my blessings every day because I've been here in lockdown for the past 4 months. I haven't left my apartment except for a once-a-week grocery run. You know, I'm 60. I'm in the higher risk range for COVID. I'm being super, super cautious. And so I feel very lucky because, first of all, I am, as I was saying, a true solitary. So I'm enormously fond of my own company. My idea of total bliss has always been to be in my apartment on my own with nowhere to go and no one to see. Now I get to do that every day. Plus, I'm lucky enough to be in lockdown in an apartment with light and views and outdoor space. And that makes a tremendous difference, not going stir crazy. So counting my blessings.
Well, I mean, I, as a solitary myself and also a lover of gin martinis, we may have to break that solitary confinement at some point and have a real martini. I've become a little bit of a connoisseur. And I go for the shaken extra hard right now to make it super, super cold. Keep it a little bit simple, and I'm just having fun with it. But very classic, and yet with my own personal touch.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And do you know? So years ago at TED, and this was before my Make Love Not Porn TED talk. I'm going to TED for quite a long time. But so TED used to have this thing called TED University, which ran concurrent to the conference, where they invited attendees to apply to do talks that would be informative and educational as well as entertaining. So I applied for, and I got to do a TED University talk on the art of the perfect martini. And so I basically packed all my martini making accoutrements, took them to, this was in Monterey, back when TED was there. And so I gave this talk where I literally went through the steps of making a martini, and I highlighted all the key points of massive debate. So, you know, the gin versus vodka, shaken versus stirred, how much vermouth. You know, my preference is a glance in the direction of the vermouth bottle. You know, seriously, guy. And combined with all of that, I also just talked through various martini anecdotes. So I shared with the audience the Cindy Gallop martini rule, which is born out of bitter personal experience. It goes 1 martini is bliss, 2 martinis is ecstasy, 3 martinis is fucking stupid. I break it all the time. But I discovered I was not the first person to come up with this rule, because there was the man who said, a martini is like a woman's breasts. 1 is not enough and 3 are too many. And then, of course, you know, there was the wonderful Dorothy Parker, who wrote, I love a good martini, 1 or 2 at the most. 3 and I'm under the table, 4 and I'm under the host. So I told all these stories, walking through the various steps making martini. And then at the end of them, I had made a martini. Then I persuaded various attendees to drink martinis with me at 10 in the morning, which is when I was giving this talk. But I must also just share another anecdote from that talk, because back in the Vietnam War days, when American soldiers were Marines are parachuted into the jungle to fight the Viet Cong, they were given this kit, you know, the backpack, and in the kit was a little box and it was a mini martini making kit. And so, this GI gets this backpack with this kit, and he says to, the officer, why do I have this? And so what the officer says is, so basically, if you get lost in the jungle anywhere, just get that martini making kit out, start making a martini, and somebody will step out from behind a tree and go, that's not the way you make a martini.
Exactly, right. I love that. How's that working out for you? But so there were so many things as you were talking that I wanted to just emphasize. And honestly, at one point I thought to myself, and I say this a lot because I'm having so much fun with this show. I just want to sit back and listen to you. I almost feel like I'm at one of your TED Talks, which by the way, I mean, 2.2 million views.
But actually, can I just tell you, Joseph, because I must admit, this is something I'm somewhat galled about. That figure would be massively higher if TED had put me on their website 11 years ago when I gave that talk, because they did not. They banned me from TED.com. And by the way, for the benefit of your viewers, watch the talk. But the thing about it is that, so back in 2009, TED was not the huge thing it is today. And there are a couple of things, I look back now and it's just very funny to think about. But the first is that TED.com and all of its talks on video were not a thing. And so when I gave that talk, as far as I was concerned, I was only talking to the audience in the auditorium. And secondly, while this would never happen today, but that was one of the attendee talks where, again, you were invited to apply for, which were short talks in between the scheduled talks. And so TED, back in the day, never rehearsed any of those short talks in advance. So TED had no idea what I was going to say, which is how I managed to become the only TED speaker to say the words "come on my face" on the TED stage 6 times in rapid succession. And so TED proceeded.
That's exactly where I stopped the video, by the way. Got
Absolutely.
it,
So TED proceeded to have a whole load of meetings about whether or not to post my talk. And Chris Anderson, the curator of TED, said to me, Cindy, we're not going to post your talk on TED.com because TED.com is visited by parents and kids and teachers with kids. In other words, my target audience, make love, not porn. He said, we're going to post it on YouTube and we'll link to it so we can say it's not actually on our site. Now, I have to tell you, if TED had posted my talk on the site from day one, you'd be looking at over 10 million views, if not more, by now. It's only, so at various intervals over the years, I asked Chris if he would reconsider. He didn't reconsider until last year. My talk was only published on TED.com last year, and that's why it only has on TED.com 200 million views.
So I didn't realize that it's only been up for 1 year. And by the way, in order to find that video, which I'll probably be, flagged or dinged for copyright infringement, these are the trials and tribulations of being a web show entrepreneur. I found it on YouTube, which itself had been seen, by the way, by over 2 million people. So all of those views add up. And it's interesting that you were banned. I had no idea. But I mean, isn't that the ultimate indicator that you're doing the right thing when at least someone's nose is out of joint? But
absolutely.
So there were a few things that I wanted to touch on. One is, well, first of all, Tracy just said, love a good gin martini, but will not tolerate one that is bruised. So stir, never shake. I'm doing a bit of both. I stir initially and then I shake. So
I'm a ferocious shaker because I actually like my martinis icy cold. And I love those teensy-weensy, almost ice flows that can gather at the top when you do that. So different tastes.
But then there were a couple of things that I just wanted to really emphasize. One is this idea of, I'm always reminded, one of my favorite quotes, I mentioned this a lot, Diane Arbus, who said, it's what I've never seen before that I recognize. And I love how you've always chased something that nobody else chases. And brought the vision and the ability then to build on that. And I don't think enough, in fact, when I say I don't think, almost nobody does that. Everybody's always chasing what everybody else is chasing, or trying to be validated by that chase or by that that decision. And you've always just not even gone against the grain. You've just been able to see things that not only people aren't seeing, but are almost discarding. So it's even more pronounced in terms of how you pursue that which is considered to be persona non grata, or ugly to the untrained or naked eye. I think that's a powerful thing. People need to be able to do that more often.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. And then the other thing is, and I think, I hope people, if they aren't seeing this, then I want to mention it, is the way that you created a story, not even a story, but a presentation about making a martini. The joy that comes out, the ability, we could talk for 1 hour today on martinis and not run dry. But I think it's so important as well to bring not just the passion, but the ability to at times embellish, at times color. To be a true storyteller, you've got to bring all of that to the table. And we just saw it there with you. And I'm pretty sure that if we just walked around your apartment right now, which I would have been in, but I was stalking you in your other apartment, you would have a story to tell for every print or painting or piece of artwork. So that was something.
But to be honest, that just was because, so, in the black apartment, and all of the contents in the black apartment are now in the sky apartment. But essentially, I've been collecting stuff my entire life. So my parents were flea market junkies, garage sale fanatics, antique store, obsessives, and I inherited that gene. And so, I've just picked stuff up from flea markets and junk shops and so on that I love, combined with things my parents gave me for my birthday as a kid. And so literally, in my home, what you see is my entire life around me. Every object, every piece of furniture, every piece of art has a story attached to it, because I came across it, living my life, and picked it up and collected it, at various stages of my life. And so, yep, every single thing does have a story. And in fact, I'm always horrified when occasionally somebody will walk into my apartment and go, ooh, did you use an interior decorator or designer? I go, no. I mean, I everything here I own and I bought myself, and B, I art directed, I decided where everything goes. And the idea of somebody else doing that is utter anathema. Very rich people who hire people to kind of buy art for them that will look good above the couch or whatever, and, right down to little objects on coffee tables. I can't imagine how you live like that, because it's important to me that I'm surrounded by things that have personal meaning for me.
Yeah, beautifully said. Now, you gave us a bunch of amazing quotes on martinis, gin martinis. And so that is both a good segue for me to play my Stump the Gallop game of quotes and segue into Make Love Not Porn. So these are two quotes that I found, and let's see if you can correctly identify who said them. And by the way, they're meant to be obscure. So if you get this one, I would be impressed. The other one you might know. If a man doesn't know how to dance, he doesn't know how to make love. There, I said it.
Well, separate to the fact that, honestly, I disagree with that statement. I have no idea who said it.
That was Craig Ferguson, so you can take it up with him. Here's the second one. If a woman tells you how to make love to her, believe her.
Separate to the fact that I totally endorse that statement, I have no idea who said it.
that was Katerina Stoikova-Klemmer, she's written many screenplays, including Bird on a Windowsill. So I just found those, and I just, I thought I would play Stump the Gallop. But what was more interesting is how you agreed with one and disagreed with another one. But I think that is a good segue to get into this incredible initiative, which you said now is completely digital. So if you wouldn't mind, please tell us about the spark, the inspiration, the beginning of this initiative.
Sure. So viewers, if you watched my TED Talk, you will see, and in fact, you've already seen from the intro to it, that I date younger men. They tend to be men in their 20s. And 12 or 13 years ago, I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized that I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. It's when those two things converge that porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 12, 13 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in complete isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I want to do something about this. So 11 years ago, as you've seen, I put up on no money this tiny clunky website at makelovenotporn.com that in its original iteration was just words. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. Launched at TED and got this extraordinary global response when my talk went viral that I had never anticipated. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I felt a responsibility to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that would make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. And I also saw an opportunity to do what I believe in very strongly, which is that the future of business is doing good and making money simultaneously. I saw the opportunity for a big business solution to this huge untapped global need. And I use the word big advisedly, Joseph, because even then, 11 years ago at concept stage, I knew if I wanted to counter the global impact of porn as default sex ed, I would have to come up with something that at least had the potential one day to be just as mass, just as mainstream, and just as all-pervasive in our society as porn currently is. So I was thinking big right from the get-go. And so what I decided to do was, I always emphasize that Make Love Not Porn is not anti-porn because the issue isn't porn. The issue is that we don't talk about sex in the real world. If we did, amongst a host of other benefits, people would then be able to bring a real-world mindset to the viewing of what is simply performative produced entertainment. So our tagline at Make Love Not Porn is pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. And our mission is one thing only, which is to help make it easier for everybody in the world to talk openly and honestly about sex. And so, given that mission, I decided to take every dynamic in social media and apply them to this one area no other social network or platform will go in order to socialize sex and to make real-world sex and talking about it socially acceptable and therefore ultimately just as socially shareable as anything else we share on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram. And so 8 years ago, my tiny team and I launched MakeLoveNotPorn.tv, which is an entirely user-generated, crowdsourced video sharing platform that celebrates real-world sex. So anybody from anywhere in the world can submit to us videos of themselves having real-world sex, but we're very clear what we mean by this. We are not porn. We are not amateur. We are building a whole new category on the internet that never before existed, social sex. So our competition isn't porn, it's Facebook and YouTube. Or rather, it would be if Facebook and YouTube allowed you to socially, sexually self-express, which they sadly don't. So social sex videos on Make Love Not Porn are not about performing for the camera. They're just about doing what you already do on every other social platform. Capture what goes on in the real world, as it happens spontaneously, in all its funny, messy, beautiful, comical, awkward, wonderful humanness. We curate to make sure of that. Our curators watch every single video submitted from beginning to end. We don't publish unless it's real, and we have a revenue sharing business model. Our members pay to subscribe, rent, and stream social sex videos. Half the income goes to our contributors, whom we call our Make Love Not Porn stars. So what we're doing at Make Love Not Porn is spearheading the social sex revolution. The revolutionary part is not the sex, it's the social.
I mean, just listening to you, it waxes lyrical, and I can again see the passion, the joy, and how much of your heart you've put into it. And also from where it began to where it is now, I think how much of a maybe what was considered to be default or de facto taboo has probably changed and morphed. And what role you've played in changing societal and even cultural perceptions and reactions to something like this. Have you seen those? Has it been obvious?
Well, so it's been a long, hard 11 years. The one thing I did not realize when I embarked on this venture was that I would fight an enormous battle every single day to build it. Essentially because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup gets to just take for granted, we can't. The small print always says no adult content. And this is all pervasive across every single area of the business in ways that people outside this sphere don't realize. I can't get funded. I can't get banked. It took me 4 years to find one bank here in America that would allow me to open a business bank account for Make Love Not Porn. Every tech service we need to operate the platform, hosting, encoding, encrypting, the terms of service always say no adult content. Biggest operational challenge is payments. PayPal won't work with adult content, Stripe can't. We had to build our entire video streaming platform from scratch as proprietary technology because existing streaming services won't stream adult content. Even something as simple as finding an email partner to send the membership emails out with. MailChimp won't work with adult content, rejected by 6 or 7 until we found SendGrid who would. And so the biggest thing we have to celebrate at Make Love Not Porn is we're still here. You know, in a world where the tech and business worlds and financial worlds are trying to shut us down every single day. We are tiny, we're bootstrapping, but that's how much traction we have. We have grown organically, you know, over the years. And, you know, that is proof of how much people want us, that we've been able to keep going. Now, imagine how enormously well we could be doing if we could just find investors. And by the way, my biggest issue raising funding is the social dynamic that I call fear of what other people will think. Because it is never about what the person I'm talking to thinks. When you understand what we're doing and why we're doing it to Make Love Not Porn, nobody can argue with it. The business case is clear. It's always their fear of what they think other people will think, which operates around sex, unlike any other area.
Well, I would say that there is something else, another reason for the ability, you know, as you said, we're still here. And it is, you know, it's a word that I would use to, there are many words I would use to describe you. But the word that jumped out to me was the word persistent, which is you're still here. And you know, like just to have a little bit of fun. I was looking, you know, I mean, obviously this is your LinkedIn, this is your tagline, right? I like to blow shit up. I'm the Michael Bay of business. But I was thinking as well, like, you know, when Ronan Farrow comes a knocking, people start to sweat bullets. The same is true with you. You have been a crusader, and you know, I think maybe the
that's
biggest...
a great comparison. I've got to take a photo of this because I'm so enormously flattered to even be included in the same slide as Ronan Farrow. I'm gonna have to take a picture of this. Fantastic.
And it's true because there, whenever, you know, I was thinking of whenever there is injustice going on and in the world, you're there, and you're the first to comment. In fact, I think I remember what was it recently where it was one of the holding companies or one of the associations had some event, and it was just a bunch of at the time it was just a bunch of white guys, and you called them out for it. And you know, maybe it would have been different 5 years or 10 years ago, but within minutes, within it seemed minutes, every single one of them was commenting and stepping up or apologizing or attempting to backpedal. And so I think that those, maybe you don't see it because you're so close to it, but those walls are cracking and crumbling. And that's why I said what might have been taboo 10 years ago is not today, and certainly won't be in 10 years' time. And that is persistence.
Oh yeah, no, and you're absolutely right, Joseph. I'm regularly asked what keeps me going, building Make Love Not Porn against all these enormous challenges. And the dynamic that most makes me do things is the one I characterize as I'm going to fucking well show you. You tell me it can't be done, I'm going to fucking well show you. You put obstacles in my path, I'm going to fucking well show you. And so, absolutely, as I always say, I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. So, yep, I'm keeping going no matter what.
Well, I think that's probably the final perfect segue. This is the perfect segue show because it's probably a good time to talk about exactly, right? If I ran the world, I would spend more time with Cindy. I wrote that today and I submitted it. I would love for you to talk a little bit about this initiative because, why just be the founder of one initiative, one company? Be the founder of two.
Yeah, no. So the sequence of events is that this is the startup that I was working on when Make Love Not Porn blew up. And so, sadly, I had to back burner If We Ran the World because even I, superhuman as I am, cannot run two startups simultaneously. But I actually designed Make Love Not Porn around the business model If We Ran the World is designed to inculcate. So If We Ran the World is born out of my belief, as I said earlier, that the future of business is doing good and making money simultaneously. And so I believe, therefore, that the business model of the future is shared values plus shared action equals shared profit, financial profit and social profit. And what I mean by that is, when brands and businesses come together with their audiences, and audiences can be consumers, employees, analysts, when you come together on the basis of values that you all share, which, by the way, is the most important requirement for a good relationship in life as much as business. You will never truly bond with someone who don't share the same values. So when you come together around shared values, and when you are then all enabled to collaboratively and collectively co-act on those values, to walk the talk together, you can then make things happen in the real world that will benefit consumers, benefit society, and benefit the brand in this business. So If We Ran the World is co-action software designed to help brands and companies integrate this business model and work with their audiences to take action. And while I had to backburn If We Ran the World, I designed Make Love Not Porn around that model. Shared values plus shared action equals shared profit. So an interesting thing, Joseph, is, people write to me about If We Ran the World all the time because we were 12 months old in beta when Harvard Business School reached out and said, this is such an innovative model, we want to write it up as a case study and teach it. And so I had this surreal experience, when If We Ran the World was 12 months old, of going to Harvard, sitting in the back of a lecture theatre, watching a professor teach If We Ran the World to the business school students, and it exists as a Harvard Business School case study. And so it's taught around the world. And, the funny thing is that, the world has now caught up with what that's all about. Because to your point, to some extent, I've regularly been too ahead of my time for my own good, and so as and when I can, I want to reactivate If We Ran the World. I need to get Make Love Not Porn funded, hire a full-time team to run it, and then to raise funding with the right brand partners for If We Ran the World. But the world has now caught up with that thinking and wants it and needs it.
So what is your vision for now? Let's just fast forward 10 years into the future. What does that look like? That vision realized?
So in terms of If We Ran the World, that looks like a world where for every business, the more money you make, the more good you do. The more good you do, the more money you make. It's entirely integrated. And for Make Love Not Porn, my vision for that world is, so as I said earlier, Make Love Not Porn's mission is one very simple thing, to make it easier for everyone in the world to talk openly and honestly about sex. And because we don't do that currently, people don't get how massively societally transformative that would be. And what I mean by that is I designed Make Love Not Porn around my own beliefs and philosophies, one of which is that everything in life starts with you and your values. I mean, again, the starting point with around the world. So I regularly ask people this question: what are your sexual values? And nobody can ever answer me because we're not taught to think like that. Our parents bring us up to have good manners, work ethic, sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed. But they should, because in bed, values like empathy, sensitivity, generosity, kindness, honesty, respect are as important as they are in every other area of our lives where we're actively taught to exercise those values. So my vision for a world where Make Love Not Porn is funded to and operates at scale is parents will bring their children up openly to have good sexual values and good sexual behavior in the same way that they currently bring them up to have good values and behavior in every other area of life. We will therefore cease to bring up rapists, because the only way that you end rape culture is by inculcating in society and openly talked about, promoted, operated, and importantly aspired to gold standard of what constitutes good sexual values and good sexual behavior. When we end that, we also end Me Too. We end sexual harassment, abuse, violence, all areas where the perpetrators currently rely on the fact that we do not talk about sex to ensure victims never speak up, never go to authorities, never to anybody. When we end that, we massively empower women and girls worldwide. When we do that, we create a far happier world for everybody, including men. And when we do that, we are one step closer to world peace. I talk about Make Love Not Porn as my attempt to bring about world peace, and I'm not joking.
I think that was the most beautiful way to end the show. And also in doing so, you built this beautiful bridge that connected the two. And it was so clear to see the cause effect and the relationship between the two. I would want to say I wish you luck, but you don't need luck. I would just want to say that I
wish me funding, Joseph. I need tons of funding.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of people with a lot of money sitting at home right now trying to put that money. So put it there, put it with her.
Exactly.
Cindy, it's been an absolute just pleasure to spend time with you. Jason says superb. And I always say that all the compliments I get in on the show are always for my guests. We are going to go next door, not to the other apartment, right? We're going to the Zoom apartment, Corona TV after show, bit.ly/Corona TV after show, where you can ask Cindy any questions about any of the initiatives or just the perfect martini.
Sure.
Cindy, thank you so much for coming in, and we'll continue the conversation soon.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much, Joseph. See you on the after show link.
I will see you there. Well, that was Cindy Gallop, and I'm going to end this broadcast. Go next door, come join me. Take care, everyone, and I'll be back tomorrow.